The notification pinged on my phone at 11:47 p.m. while I was elbow deep in the engine of my 15-year-old Honda Civic. Nothing says living the American dream quite like fixing your own car in a suburban driveway while your neighbors sleep peacefully in their McMansions. Chase Bank alert. Card ending in 4829 used for $847, $32 at Restore Milano, Milan, Italy. I stared at the screen, motor oil dripping from my fingers onto the cracked concrete. My wife Sarah had been traveling alone to clear her head for the past week. Apparently, clearing one's head required expensive Italian cuisine. Funny thing about traveling alone, I muttered to the darkness, is that it usually involves being, alone. I wiped my hands on an old rag and opened the banking app. 3 more charges from Milan over the past 2 days. Hotels, restaurants, shopping, all on our joint account. All while my dear wife of 22 years was supposedly on a soul-arcing solo journey through Europe. The math was simple. Even for a guy who spent his days crunching numbers for Henderson and Associates accounting. Sarah plus expensive dinner for 2 minus honesty equals 1 very stupid husband who'd been played for a fool. I canceled the cards immediately. Every single one. Credit cards, debit cards, even her precious platinum membership card for that overpriced spa downtown. My phone started buzzing within minutes. 17 missed calls and counting. Take your time clearing your head, sweetheart, I said to her contact photo on my phone. But you're doing it on your own dime now. The garage door across the street creaked open, and my neighbor, Mrs. Carty, peeked out. That woman had a 6th sense for drama. She could smell marital discord from 3 houses away. "Everything all right, David?" she called out in that sing-gong voice that meant she was fishing for gossip. "Just peachy, Mrs. Carty, just fixing what's broken." She nodded knowingly and retreated into her house. I'd bet money she was already texting someone about the situation at the Morrison household. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Sarah. "David, what's wrong with the cards?" "I'm stranded here," I typed back. "Funny. I thought you were traveling alone. Hard to be stranded when you're by yourself." The response came quickly. "Don't be ridiculous. The cards must be frozen by mistake. Call the bank. Already did." Told them my cards were being used fraudulently. They were very understanding. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. "Finally, we need to talk when I get home. Looking forward to it. Hope your traveling companion doesn't mind, Coach." I pocketed the phone and went back to work on the car. At least the Honda was honest about being broken. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't while secretly falling apart behind my back. The next morning brought more revelations, I'd always respected Sarah's privacy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Her iPad was still connected to our home Wi-Fi, and she'd never been particularly careful about passwords. Our anniversary date got me in on the 2nd try. The messages were all there. Months of them. Sarah and someone named Liam planning trips, sharing intimate photos, discussing their future together. The man was apparently some kind of former college football player turned entrepreneur. All flash and no substance from what I could tell from his social media profiles. But the real kicker came from Sarah's messages with her best friend Julia. They'd been planning this European trip for months, complete with detailed discussions about how to handle the David situation. When Sarah was ready to make her move, Julia had written, "Just string him along until you're ready. Men like David are so predictable. He'll never suspect anything until it's too late." Sarah's response, "I almost feel bad sometimes, but I can't spend the rest of my life settling for mediocre." Mediocre, 22 years of marriage, 2 kids through college, a mortgage paid down to nothing, and I was mediocre. I screenshot everything and backed it up to a secure cloud account. Then I started making plans of my own. Sarah returned from her soul-arching journey 3 days later, looking tanned and relaxed. She'd managed to book a flight home using her company credit card, though I'm sure that conversation with accounting would be interesting. "We need to talk," she said, setting her designer luggage in the foyer. "I'm sure we do. How was your trip? Meet anyone interesting?" She had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was fine. Relaxing. I did a lot of thinking. "I'll bet." "Come on, let's sit down." "I've been doing some thinking too." We settled in the living room, the same room where we'd opened Christmas presents with our kids for over 2 decades. The same room where we'd planned our future, discussed dreams, made love on the couch during lazy Sunday afternoons. Now it felt like a courtroom. "David, I know you're upset about the credit cards, but I'm not upset about the credit cards, Sarah. I'm curious about the company you kept while using them." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "Resta Milano. $847 for one person. You must have been really hungry." I met some other travelers. We shared a meal. Travelers, plural. That's interesting because your text messages suggest it was just one traveler. Tall, athletic, drives a BMW, and has very specific opinions about your husband being mediocre. The color drained completely from her face. "David, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were good with words. It's one of the things I loved about you." Past tense being the operative phrase. She started crying then, crying. Not the genuine tears of remorse, but the calculated tears of someone who'd been caught and was looking for sympathy. I'd seen her use the same technique in arguments with our kids when they were teenagers. "It just happened," she said. "I wasn't looking for it. I was lonely and you've been so distant lately. So, this is my fault. No, that's not what I meant. Things between us haven't been good for a long time, David." You have to admit that she wasn't wrong. We'd been going through the motions for years, but I'd been trying to fix things, not replace them with a newer model. "How long?" I asked. "How long?" "What?" "Don't play dumb, Sarah. How long have you been screwing around with Liam?" She flinched at the bluntness. 6 months, maybe 7. And Julia knew the whole time. It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. She introduced us at that company party last spring. The pieces clicked into place. Julia worked at the same advertising agency as Sarah. She'd been coming around the house more often lately, always with some excuse to pull Sarah aside for girl talk. Always asking pointed questions about our marriage, our plans, our finances. "So, what's the plan?" I asked. "Divorce me, take half of everything, and ride off into the sunset with your football hero." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Sarah?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning to blow up our life while I've been working 16-hour weeks to keep us comfortable." She stood up abruptly. "I need some air. This is too much right now." "Sure. Go call Julia. I'm sure she'll have some great advice about how to handle the situation." Sarah grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "We'll talk more later when you're not being so hostile." "I'm not being hostile, sweetheart. I'm being honest. I know it's a foreign concept, but try to keep up." After she left, I sat in the quiet house and tried to process everything. 22 years of marriage, and it had all been reduced to a series of lies and credit card statements. My phone rang. It was my old friend Reggie from the boxing gym downtown. "Hey Dave, haven't seen you in a while. Everything okay?" "Actually, no. Everything's pretty much gone to hell. You got time for a beer? Always got time for a friend. Meet me at Murphy's in an hour. Reggie had been a cop for 30 years before retiring and opening his gym. He'd seen every kind of human drama imaginable, and he had a talent for cutting through. So, she's been cheating, he said after I'd given him the abbreviated version, and her best friend set it up. That about sums it up. What are you going to do? I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to just file for divorce and be done with it. But another part of me wants to make them pay for what they've done. Reggie took a long drink of his beer. Revenge is a dangerous game, Dave. Sometimes it costs more than it's worth. Maybe, but doing nothing feels like letting them win. Who says you have to do nothing? There's a difference between rolling over and burning everything down. He was right, of course. But sitting there in that bar, thinking about Sarah and Liam, laughing about my mediocrity while spending my money, the distinction felt pretty thin. The first casualty was our social circle. Sarah had apparently been sharing details of our marital problems with more people than just Julia. By the end of the week, I was getting awkward phone calls from friends who'd heard Sarah's side of the story. Tom Bradley called on Thursday evening. We'd been friends since college, stood up in each other's weddings, coached our kids' little league teams together. Dave, I heard about you and Sarah. I'm sorry, man. Thanks, Tom. It's been a rough week. Look, I don't want to take sides here, but Sarah's really hurting. Maybe you two could work things out in counseling or something. Sarah's hurting. That's interesting. Did she mention why she's hurting? She said you've been controlling and paranoid, that you cut off her credit cards while she was traveling and basically stranded her overseas. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Is that what she told you? Well, yeah. And Julia confirmed it. They're worried about you, Dave. This doesn't sound like the guy I know. Did Sarah mention that she was traveling with her boyfriend, or that she'd been having an affair for 7 months? Silence on the other end of the line. Dave, come on. That doesn't sound like Sarah. I've got the credit card statements, Tom. Hotel rooms for 2 romantic dinners, couples activities. I've got text messages between her and this guy going back months. I've got messages between her and Julia planning the whole thing. Even if that's true, cutting off her cards was pretty extreme. Even if that's true. I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. Tom, she spent $800 on dinner for 2 while telling me she was traveling alone. What part of that sounds reasonable to you? Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this. You're already in the middle of it. You called me to tell me I should apologize to my cheating wife for being paranoid. That's pretty much the definition of being in the middle. The conversation went downhill from there. By the time we hung up, 20 years of friendship had been reduced to awkward politeness and mutual disappointment. Jennifer Martinez called the next day. She and her husband Carlos had been regular dinner companions for years. We'd vacationed together, celebrated holidays together, shared the ups and downs of raising kids. David, I'm concerned about you. Sarah says, you've been acting erratically. Define erratically. Spying on her, controlling her finances, making wild accusations. That's not the David I know. The David you know was married to a woman who wasn't screwing around behind his back. Circumstances change people. Even if there were problems in your marriage, that doesn't justify Jennifer. Stop. Just stop. Did you know about the affair? What affair, David? You're starting to sound paranoid. Sarah has been having an affair with a guy named Liam for 7 months. Julia set them up and has been helping Sarah plan her exit strategy. I have documentation of all of it. I think you need to talk to someone, a therapist, or I think I need better friends. I hung up on her. Within an hour, My phone was buzzing with text messages from other people in our social circle. Sarah and Julia had been busy painting me as an unstable, controlling husband who was making up stories to justify his abusive behavior. The narrative was simple and effective. David Morrison had always been a little controlling, a little jealous, a little insecure. Sarah had finally stood up for herself by taking a solo trip to Europe. And David had responded by cutting off her credit cards and spinning elaborate conspiracy theories about affairs and betrayals. By Saturday, I'd lost half my friends and gained a reputation as an unhinged spouse. The people who bothered to call me at all did so with the tone you'd use with someone who might be dangerous. "This is what they planned," I said to Reggie over beers that evening. "This whole victim narrative make me look crazy, so when she files for divorce, everyone thinks she's escaping an abusive marriage." "Smart," Reggie admitted. "Evil, but smart. Julia's been planning this for a while. The question is, why? What does Julia get out of destroying my marriage? Maybe she just likes the drama. Some people are wired that way. But I suspected there was more to it. Julia had always been competitive with Sarah, always trying to one-up her in career, lifestyle, relationships. Maybe helping Sarah blow up her stable marriage was just another way to feel superior. Or maybe there was something else, something I hadn't figured out yet. Sunday brought the confrontation I'd been dreading. Our kids were both in college, but they came home for Sunday dinner most weeks. Ross was a senior at State studying business. Amelia was a sophomore at the art school downtown. They walked into a house that felt like a war zone. "What's going on?" Amelia asked immediately. She'd always been perceptive, even as a little kid. Sarah and I looked at each other across the kitchen island. We hadn't discussed what to tell them. "Your father and I are having some problems," Sarah said carefully. "What kind of problems?" Ross asked. He was more direct than his sister, less patient with evasion. "Marriage problems," I said. "Your mother has been seeing someone else." "Dad." Amelia looked shocked. Sarah's face flushed red. It's more complicated than that." "Is it true?" Ross asked his mother directly. Sarah looked trapped. "I've made some mistakes, but your father has been yes or no, Mom. Are you cheating on Dad?" The silence stretched out until it became an answer itself. "How long?" Amelia asked quietly. "It doesn't matter how long," Sarah said. "What matters is that your father and I need to figure out how to move forward." "It matters to me," Ross said. His voice was getting harder. "How long have you been lying to us?" "I haven't been lying to you." "This has nothing to do with you kids," Ross said. "Everything you do affects us. Every lie you tell, every time you pretend everything's fine while you're screwing around behind Dad's back, it affects us." "Ross, please." 7 months, I said quietly. "Your mother has been having an affair for 7 months." Amelia started crying. Ross just looked disgusted. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. You never wanted us to find out at all. Ross said you were just going to keep lying until you were ready to blow up the family." "That's not true." "Then what was the plan, Mom? When were you going to tell us? After you'd already moved out? After the divorce papers were filed? Or were you just going to let Dad be the bad guy forever?" Sarah couldn't answer that because Ross was right, and we all knew it. The kids left early. Amelia hugged me tight before she went, whispering, "I'm sorry, Daddy," in my ear like she used to when she was little. Ross just shook his head and walked out without saying goodbye to his mother. "Look what you've done," Sarah said after they were gone. "Look what I've done. I'm not the one who's been lying to them for 7 months. You didn't have to tell them like that. You could have been more gentle. Gentle? Like the way you were gentle when you told all our friends that I am an abusive, paranoid husband. She had the grace to look ashamed. I was trying to protect myself from what? The consequences of your actions. From you. From your anger. My anger. Sarah, I haven't raised my voice to you once since you got back. I haven't threatened you, haven't touched you, haven't done anything but ask for honesty. If that feels like abuse to you, maybe the problem isn't me. She started to respond, then stopped. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married, the one who used to take responsibility for her mistakes instead of blaming everyone else for them. But the moment passed. I'm staying at Julia's tonight, she said. We both need space to think. Give my regards to Liam, I said. I'm sure he's anxious to hear how the family meeting went. She flinched, but didn't deny it. After she left, I sat in the empty house and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The answer was simple. It hadn't gone wrong quickly. It had been going wrong for months, maybe years. I'd just been too trusting, too comfortable, too mediocre to notice. But I wasn't feeling mediocre anymore. The confrontation with my former friends came sooner than expected. Tom Bradley called Tuesday morning and asked me to meet him for lunch at Murphy's Pub. His tone suggested it wasn't a social invitation. I arrived to find Tom, Carlos Martinez, and Mike Stevens waiting for me in a back booth. Mike had been my golf partner for 10 years. Seeing the three of them together, looking like they were planning an intervention, told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go. Dave, thanks for coming, Tom said as I sat down. We wanted to talk to you about Sarah. I figured. Did she send you, or was this Julia's idea? Carlos leaned forward. Nobody sent us, Dave. We're here because we're worried about you. Worried about me? That's touching. Where was all this concern when my wife was planning to destroy our marriage? That's what we want to talk about, Mike said. This whole affair story, Dave, it doesn't add up. I stared at him. Doesn't add up. How? We've known Sarah for 20 years, Tom said. She's not the type to cheat. She's devoted to you and the kids. Devoted enough to spend 7 months planning her exit strategy with another man. Even if she made a mistake, Carlos said, the way you're handling it is making everything worse. Cutting off her credit cards, turning the kids against her, spreading rumors. I could feel my voice getting louder. I haven't told anyone except you guys. And that was only after you called me to lecture me about being paranoid. Julia says, you've been calling Sarah's co-workers trying to get her fired. Mike said, Julia's lying. But it's interesting that she's so concerned about Sarah's job security. Maybe she should worry about her own. The three of them exchanged glances. Tom cleared his throat. Dave, we think you should consider getting some help. Therapy, maybe medication. This level of paranoia isn't healthy. Something snapped inside me. These men had been my friends for decades. We'd celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through failures, been there for each other when life got hard. And now they were sitting here treating me like a dangerous mental patient because my cheating wife and her manipulative friend had convinced them I was crazy. You want proof? I said, pulling out my phone. Here's proof. I started reading from Sarah's text messages with Liam, the intimate ones, the ones where they discussed their future together, the ones where they laughed about how clueless I was. Stop, Tom said after the first few messages. Dave, this is what, Tom? This is uncomfortable. This is embarrassing. Yeah, it is. It's embarrassing as hell to find out your wife thinks you're mediocre and boring. It's embarrassing to discover that your friends think you're so pathetic that you'd make up an affair to get attention. We don't think you're pathetic, Carlos said. We think you're hurting and not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. You want to see more? Here are the credit card statements, hotel rooms for two, romantic dinners, couples massages. Here are the photos she sent him. Here are the messages between Sarah and Julia. Planning the whole thing. I kept reading, my voice getting louder with each revelation. Other people in the restaurant were starting to stare. But I didn't care. These men had come here to ambush me, to make me feel crazy and isolated. They were going to hear every ugly detail. Jesus, Dave, stop, Mike said. We get it. Do you? Do you really? Because 5 minutes ago you were telling me I was paranoid and delusional. Now you're telling me to stop reading the evidence that proves I was right. Okay. So Sarah made a mistake. Tom said that doesn't justify a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is double booking dinner plans. 7 months of lying and cheating and planning to destroy our family isn't a mistake, Tom. It's a choice. Even so, the way you're handling it, how should I handle it? Should I pretend it didn't happen? Should I apologize for being boring and mediocre? Should I thank her for finally finding someone who appreciates her? You should try to save your marriage, Carlos said. 22 years is worth fighting for. I agree. Too bad Sarah didn't feel the same way. The argument escalated from there. They kept insisting that I was overreacting, that I was being vindictive, that I was destroying any chance of reconciliation. I kept pointing out that there was no marriage left to save, that Sarah had already made her choice, that I was just refusing to pretend otherwise. You're not the same person, Mike said finally. The Dave I know wouldn't act like this. You're right. The Dave, you know, was a trusting, naive fool who worked his ass off to support a woman who was planning to leave him the whole time. That Dave is gone. So what? You're just going to burn everything down? Your marriage, your friendships, your reputation. My marriage was already burned down. My friendships were apparently conditional on me being a victim. And my reputation? My reputation is that I'm a boring accountant who got played by his wife. I can live with people knowing the truth. Tom stood up. I think we're done here. We were done the minute you decided to take Sarah's word over mine without even asking to see the evidence. We were done the minute you decided that being cheated on makes me the bad guy. Nobody thinks you're the bad guy, Dave. We just think you're handling this wrong. No, Tom. You think I should handle it quietly? You think I should be ashamed and embarrassed and grateful for whatever scraps of sympathy you're willing to throw me? You think I should apologize for making everyone uncomfortable by refusing to pretend my wife didn't betray me? Carlos shook his head. This isn't the Dave we know. Good. The Dave you know was a pushover. This Dave has a backbone. They left without saying goodbye. I sat in the booth, surrounded by the wreckage of 20 years of friendship, and felt something that might have been relief. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you had quite a scene at Murphy's today. You're making this harder than it has to be. Dash J. Julia. Somehow she'd already heard about the confrontation. The woman had a network of informants that would make the CIA jealous. I typed back, just getting started. Her response came quickly. Sarah doesn't want to hurt you, but if you keep pushing, she'll have to protect herself. From what? The truth. From harassment, from stalking, from financial abuse. You'd be surprised how quickly a restraining order can be issued when a woman feels threatened. The threat was clear. Keep pushing. And they'd escalate their campaign to paint me as dangerous. They'd use the legal system to isolate me completely, make me look like the kind of man who terrorizes his ex-wife. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about my options. I could back down, accept the narrative they'd created, try to salvage what was left of my reputation and relationships. I could be the bigger person, take the high road, move on with dignity. Or I could show them what an actually dangerous man looked like. I deleted Julia's message without responding and started making plans. The beauty of being an accountant is that you understand how money works. You understand paper trails, legal documentation, and the importance of covering your tracks. You also understand that the most devastating attacks are often the most subtle ones. I started with Julia. A little research revealed that Julia Patterson, senior account executive at Morrison & Associates Advertising, had been skimming money from client accounts for over 2 years. Small amounts carefully distributed across multiple accounts, always under the threshold that would trigger automatic audits. It was elegant and sophisticated and completely illegal. I'd actually discovered it by accident 6 months earlier while helping Sarah with some tax paperwork. Julia had asked Sarah to review some invoices, and Sarah had brought them home. The numbers hadn't added up, and my accountant's brain couldn't let it go until I figured out why. At the time, I'd kept quiet about it. Julia was Sarah's best friend, and I hadn't wanted to cause problems. I'd convinced myself that maybe I was wrong, that there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. Now, I knew better. Julia had been stealing from her clients while playing puppet master with my marriage. Time to return the favor. I spent 3 days documenting everything. Account numbers, transaction dates, amounts, patterns. I cross-referenced the stolen money with Julia's personal expenses, the new car, the designer clothes, the expensive vacations she somehow afforded on her salary. Then I made copies of everything and sent them to the appropriate authorities. The IRS, the State Attorney General's office, and Julia's biggest client, Henderson Industries. I also sent copies to Julia's husband, Mark, along with a note. Thought you should know how Julia's been affording her new lifestyle. You might want to talk to a lawyer about protecting your assets before the indictments come down. The response was swift and beautiful. Julia was suspended from her job pending investigation. Her assets were frozen. Mark filed for divorce and moved out of their house. Within a week, she went from successful professional to unemployed criminal defendant, facing federal fraud charges. But that was just the opening move. Sarah had been staying at Julia's house, but with Julia's world collapsing, she had to find somewhere else to go. She couldn't come home. The tension between us was too thick. So she moved in with Liam. That gave me the opening I needed. Liam Bradshaw, former college football star turned entrepreneur, had built his business on image and connections. He ran a sports marketing company that represented local athletes and organized corporate events. His success depended on his reputation as a trustworthy, family-friendly businessman. I started documenting his relationship with my married wife. Photos of them together, copies of hotel receipts, evidence of their European trip. Then I created a simple website, The Real Liam Bradshaw. The site looked professional, like an investigative news report. It laid out the timeline of Liam's affair with Sarah, complete with documentation. It showed how he'd pursued a married woman, helped her deceive her family, and encouraged her to abandon her responsibilities. But the real genius was in how I framed the story. I didn't present myself as a victim. Instead, I positioned it as a cautionary tale for other business owners. Would you trust your company's reputation to a man who helps married women lie to their families? I sent the link to every client, partner, and potential customer in Liam's network. I posted it on business review sites, social media groups, and professional forums. I made sure it would be the first thing anyone saw when they Googled his name. The effect was immediate. 3 major clients canceled their contracts. A corporate event he was organizing got moved to a different company. His professional reputation, built over years of careful networking, crumbled in a matter of days. But I wasn't done with Sarah. My wife had always been proud of her professional image. She'd worked hard to build her career, and her reputation in the advertising world was important to her. She'd sacrificed family time, missed kids' events, and prioritized work relationships over personal ones, all in service of her professional ambitions. Time to see how much those ambitions were worth. I created a second website. This one focused on Sarah's professional conduct. It documented how she'd used company resources to plan her affair. Company computers for personal emails, company credit cards for personal expenses, company time for personal phone calls and meetings. More importantly, it showed how her personal drama was affecting her work. Missed deadlines, distracted behavior, conflicts with colleagues who'd been dragged into her marital problems. I sent the information to Sarah's boss, her colleagues, and the HR department. I also sent it to the clients she worked with, framed as a concern about whether their accounts were getting the attention they deserved. The advertising world is small and gossipy. Within days, everyone in the industry knew about Sarah Morrison's messy personal life and questionable professional judgment. Her boss called her in for a meeting on Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, she was looking for a new job. The final piece was the most personal. Sarah and I had built our life together carefully over 22 years. We'd accumulated assets, made investments, planned for retirement. Everything was joint. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate, even our life insurance policies. But joint ownership works both ways. Anything Sarah could do, I could do too. I liquidated our investment accounts and moved the money to accounts in my name only. I refinanced our house, taking out all the equity and putting it in a separate account. I canceled our joint credit cards and opened new ones that only I controlled. Legally, I was entitled to do all of this. We were still married, and I had every right to manage our joint assets. The fact that I was doing it to protect myself from Sarah's financial planning didn't make it illegal. By the time Sarah realized what was happening, I controlled every asset we'd built together. She had no access to money, no credit, no financial resources except what she could earn from a job she no longer had. The beauty of it was that I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't broken any laws, hadn't violated any court orders, hadn't even raised my voice. I'd simply used the same tools and resources that Sarah and Julia had been using against me. The difference was that I was better at it. Sarah showed up at the house on Tuesday evening looking haggarded and desperate. "David, we need to talk. I'm listening. You've destroyed everything. Julia's facing criminal charges. Liam's business is ruined. I lost my job. We have no money, no credit, nothing. That's terrible. You should probably talk to a lawyer about protecting your assets. You know, I can't afford a lawyer. You made sure of that. I made sure that I protected myself from further financial abuse. If you'd like to discuss a fair division of our assets, I'm happy to do that. But it'll be based on what's fair, not on what's convenient for you and your boyfriend." She started crying then. Real tears this time, not the calculated manipulation she'd used before. "I'm sorry," she said. "I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But this isn't you, David. This isn't who you are. You're right. The man you married would have let you walk all over him. He would have apologized for being boring and mediocre. He would have given you half of everything and wished you well with your new life. That man was a better person than this. That man was a fool. This man learned from his mistakes. She looked around the house we'd shared for 15 years, taking in the family photos, the memories, the life we'd built together. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. I want you to experience the same helplessness and humiliation you put me through." "And then what? After you've gotten your revenge, then what?" "Then we'll see. Maybe we can have an honest conversation about our future. Or maybe we'll discover that some things can't be repaired once they're broken." She nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. "I deserve this," she said quietly. "Yes, you do." She left without another word. Through the window, I watched her get into Liam's BMW, the same car he'd used to pick her up for their secret dates. The car was dented now, the paint scratched. Someone had apparently taken exception to his behavior and expressed it through automotive vandalism. I hadn't done that, but I couldn't say I was sorry to see it. My phone buzzed with a text from Ross. Saw the news about Mom's friend Julia. "Dad, what did you do?" I typed back. "I told the truth. Sometimes that's enough." His response came quickly. "Good for you." Amelia texted an hour later. "Mom called crying. She says you destroyed her life. She destroyed her own life. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "Are you okay?" "You sound different." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in months." And I was. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like myself again. Not the trusting fool who'd been played for a sucker. Not the bitter victim nursing his wounds. I felt like a man who'd been pushed too far and had pushed back harder. Sarah had called mediocre. Julia had called me predictable. Liam had called me pathetic. They'd all been wrong. The next morning brought the final surprise. A knock on my door revealed two people I didn't recognize. A middle-aged woman in a business suit and a younger man with a badge. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Detective Sarah Chen, and this is Agent Williams from the FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions about Julia Patterson and some financial irregularities we're investigating." I invited them in and made coffee. We sat in my living room, the same room where Sarah had tried to convince me I was paranoid. And I told them everything I knew about Julia's embezzlement scheme. "You have excellent documentation," Agent Williams said, reviewing my files. "Very thorough, very professional. I'm an accountant. Documentation is what I do." "How long have you known about Mrs. Patterson's activities?" "I first suspected something about 6 months ago, but I didn't have proof until recently. I didn't want to make accusations without being certain." "And what prompted you to investigate further?" I explained about Julia's involvement in Sarah's affair, her role in manipulating our social circle, her threats about restraining orders. "So, this was retaliation?" Detective Chen asked. "This was justice. Julia committed crimes. I documented them and reported them to the appropriate authorities. The fact that she'd also been trying to destroy my marriage doesn't change the fact that she's a criminal." They asked a few more questions, took copies of my documentation, and left. As they were going, Agent Williams turned back. "For what it's worth, Mr. Morrison, you did the right thing. A lot of people would have just kept quiet to avoid complications. A lot of people aren't married to women who conspire with embezzlers." He smiled. "Good point." After they left, I sat in my quiet house and took inventory. Sarah was unemployed and broke. Liam's business was in ruins. Julia was facing federal charges. My former friends were probably rethinking their assumptions about my character. And me, I was free. Free from a marriage built on lies. Free from friends who didn't really know me. Free from the obligation to be the nice guy who always gets stepped on. It had taken me 22 years to learn the lesson, but I'd finally figured it out. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play by the other person's rules. Sarah had wanted to paint me as the villain in her story. Julia had wanted to manipulate me like a chess piece. Liam had wanted to take what was mine without consequences. They'd all gotten exactly what they wanted. I was the villain in their story. Now the difference was, I was the villain who'd won. My phone rang. Sarah's number. "David, please, we need to talk. Really talk this time. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can I come over? Can we try to figure out how to fix this?" I looked around my empty house, thought about the life we'd built and destroyed, considered the possibility that some things really could be repaired. "Come on over," I said. "We'll talk." But as I hung up the phone, I was already planning my next move because I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. The game never really ends. It just moves to the next level, and I was very good at games. Sarah arrived an hour later looking nervous and uncertain. She sat on the edge of the couch like she was ready to run if necessary. "I've been thinking," she said, "about everything about what I did, what you did, where we go from here. And what did you conclude? That we're both different people now. That maybe we can't go back to what we were, but maybe we can figure out what we want to be going forward." That's very philosophical. What does it mean in practical terms? It means I want to try if you're willing. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try to rebuild what we had. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, manipulation, hidden agendas. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "What about Liam?" "It's over. It's been over since I realized what you were capable of, what I was capable of, what we'd all become. And Julia used me, used both of us. I see that now. It took federal charges for you to figure that out." She flinched, but didn't look away. I was stupid, selfish. I thought I deserved something more exciting than what we had. And I let her convince me that you were the problem. I was boring, mediocre, predictable. You were stable, loyal, honest. I threw that away for excitement, and look where it got me. We sat in silence for a while, both of us thinking about the path that had led us here. "If we try this," I said finally, "it's going to be different. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I know. I'm not going to be the understanding, forgiving husband who pretends this never happened. I'm not going to be grateful that you came back or patient while you figure out what you want. I know. I'm going to be watching you, checking up on you, questioning everything until you prove that you deserve to be trusted again. I understand. And if you ever betray me again, what I did to Julia and Liam will look like a gentle warning compared to what I'll do to you." She met my eyes directly. "I believe you." "Good. Then we understand each other." She nodded. "So what now? Now we see if we can build something real out of the wreckage of something fake." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even forgiveness, really. But it was honest. And after months of lies and manipulation, honesty felt like the most radical thing we could try. 6 months later, Sarah and I were still married, still working on rebuilding trust, still figuring out who we were as individuals and as a couple. Julia was serving 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement. Liam had moved to another state and was trying to rebuild his business under a different name. Most of our old friends had either apologized or faded away entirely. But we had new friends, people who knew our story and respected how we'd handled it. People who understood that sometimes the only way to save something is to be willing to destroy it first. Ross and Amelia had both struggled with our reconciliation. They'd been ready to support me through a divorce, and they weren't sure what to make of our decision to try again. But they were young, and they still believed in happy endings. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was a happy ending, just not the kind you see in movies. Or maybe it was just the beginning of a different story. A story about two people who'd learned that love without respect is worthless, that trust without honesty is impossible, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. I was in my garage working on the Honda again when Sarah came out with 2 beers. "Still fixing what's broken?" she asked, echoing Mrs. Card's question from months earlier. "Some things are worth fixing," I said, taking the beer. "Others need to be scrapped and replaced." "Which category do we fall into?" Still figuring that out. She smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since before the whole mess started. "I love you," she said. "The new you, the one who won't let people walk all over him. I love you too. The version of you that's learning to tell the truth." It wasn't poetry, but it was real. And real was all we had to work with. As we stood there in the garage drinking beer and watching the sun set over our suburban neighborhood, I thought about the man I'd been and the man I'd become, about the marriage we'd lost and the one we were trying to build. Sarah had been right about one thing. I wasn't mediocre anymore. But then again, neither was she.